Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1985 horror sequel, Day of the Dead. Now, Day of the Dead is one of those films that over the years has grown on me. The first time I saw this, I gotta be honest, I wasn't a big fan of it. I just seen Dawn of the Dead and I really liked it. So I think my expectations were way too high for Day of the Dead. And also, I expected a similar film as Dawn for whatever reason, and this definitely is not anything like Dawn of the Dead in terms of its tone and in terms of the structure of the script and a lot of other elements. So while there were some things that I did like, even at the time, I wasn't a fan of it. But because I'm a big fan of Romero and really like his work. I mean, Creepshow is my favorite film in the horror genre, and it's my favorite film of Romero's. So I'd always come back to Day of the Dead, even though I wasn't really a significant fan of it at first. But it's one of those movies that the more time that I spent with it, the more viewings that I had, the more I appreciated it. And now I really like the film. There are other zombie films that I like more, like Return of the Living Dead, but it's still firmly in my top 10. I really enjoy this film. I think it's definitely a little bit underrated in comparison to some of the other zombie films out there. I know it's got a cult following. I know there's a lot of people who really like it, but it's a movie that was critically derided when it came out. Like Roger Ebert hated this film. He gave it like 1.5 stars. And it's also a movie that didn't do that well financially. It's not entirely the film's fault because it didn't get really that wide of a distribution at all. But yeah, it didn't do as well financially as Dawn of the Dead or even the original Night of the Living Dead. So it had this reputation of being a critical and honestly a financial flop. And I think over the years has definitely become more of a cult film. But I think it's a movie that it's just one of those films that suffers from just following up something as grand and as spectacular as Dawn of the Dead. And very few films have ever really reached the same peak as Dawn. So this was a movie that was really kind of stuck in between a rock and a hard place when it comes to trying to follow up something so great. But I still think it manages to hold its own just fine. I think when you look at Day of the Dead, you have to look at it as its own film, as just another film that takes place within the universe of Romero's Dead series. Which is honestly what Dawn of the Dead was. Dawn of the Dead was not a direct sequel to Night of the Living Dead. It was its own thing. So Day of the Dead is a similar thing. Now I know that Romero actually had much bigger and much more epic plans for this film. And it's honestly too bad that we didn't get to see that because I feel seeing a George A. Romero zombie epic with a $7 million budget and getting to witness what he was calling the Gone with the Wind of zombie movies, that definitely does seem like a missed opportunity. But the reason why we never got that is because Romero stuck to his guns again. He stuck to his guns when it comes to the first film. He stuck to his guns when it comes to Dawn of the Dead. When it comes to just doing what he wanted to do creatively, and the producers and the financiers and the people involved who were going to be providing Romero with the money to do this big epic zombie movie, they gave him an ultimatum. It's like it can't be unrated. It's got to be rated R for mass appeal so we can make the most money out of this. And Romero was not willing to sacrifice the creativity and the flexibility that he was able to have when it comes to working with a unrated uh, cut. So he declined. he stuck to his guns. The budget got cut, and he scaled the concept down considerably for the third entry in the Dead series. And he actually started working on the third entry after Dawn of the Dead, but it just didn't wind up getting off the ground. And in the meantime, he did Night Riders and Creepshow, which of course I'm immensely thankful for Creepshow. I'm also thankful for this film too, because it's a really solid film in its own right. Now, Romero's direction in this, I think, is really good. I think he definitely, at this point in time, was a veteran filmmaker. He was a guy who had already established himself as one of the best horror directors out there. And this film was no exception. The way that he really utilizes everything when it comes to this setting, which is very limited in terms of this mine shaft, or not really a shaft, but just this mine, this underground mine, and this set that was not nearly as, let's just say, full of charm or full of variety as the mall in Dawn of the Dead. He still managed to get the most out of it visually that he possibly could. And then when it comes to shooting scenes with the zombies, I honestly think this is kind of the best I've seen these zombies look, especially in a Romero zombie film, like the opening scene where the zombies come out of their hiding spots and start shambling around, and you get the scene before the opening titles with the tongue, with what I think was called Dr. Tongue, if I remember correctly. The people behind the zombie effects, like Tom Savini and company, they gave it a nickname. And yeah, the tongue zombie, just a great looking effect, and just a lot of personality and charm, and just a lot of different variety with the looks for the zombies in this one in comparison to Dawn or Night of Living Dead, because the technology and what techniques were available for makeup artists had just exploded at this time in the mid 80s. And Romero is just a master at showing these effects in ways where they are lit properly so they don't just look like a bunch of people wearing rubber. And there are a lot of scenes in this where there's just a lot of really great moments of tension and genuine fear and suspense. The sequence in the caves where the characters are trying to stay one step ahead of these zombies is honestly one of the more intense and suspenseful scenes out of any of Romero's zombie films. And as usual, he works really well with this cast, gets the most out of them, utilizes a lot of different camera techniques and angles and POVs and different perspectives and different type of shots that he utilizes at his disposal. And yeah, it's just a really well directed film from a fantastic filmmaker in his prime. And the screenplay, which is also by George Romero, is also great. I think his script for Day of the Dead is honestly one of his more underrated screenplays, because it takes a very simple concept of, yet again, another group of people who are just trying to survive in the middle of this bleak zombie apocalypse. And this time around, he provides a wider array of characters and creates a conflict between the military types that are working for these researchers and the other people who are just kind of there along for the ride, who are just trying to do their part to survive, and the helicopter pilot and the radio technician or tech guy. And the way that he pits them against each other, as well as the zombies and the mad scientist, really creates a very interesting and compelling dynamic throughout the screenplay. And I like the fact that in this film in particular, even though the ending is something that you could consider maybe to be happy because of the fact that these characters don't necessarily die on screen, it still has this bleak undertone to it. There is never really a moment in the story, in the script, where you feel like, oh, this is over. The horror is over. It's like, no, the horror is not over, and it will never be over. This is the end of the world, and just have to make the best of what time that we have left. And there's a lot of moments in the script where it's emphasizing the finality of this and how people are dealing with that and how people deal with that in different ways and how certain characters come to that ultimate conclusion. And yeah, I think that's just some really good writing. Yes, some of the dialogue's a bit over the top, like some of the stuff with Steele in the beginning, and all the dick jokes, and there are a lot of scenes where people are arguing and yelling and screaming at each other, but it makes sense because they're trapped. They're trapped in this tight enclosed space. They're limited. They can't really go anywhere. And on top of that, they have to deal with these zombies, and they have to deal with this pressure of trying to find a cure. That's the whole point, is they're capturing these zombies to try to find a cure for this zombie outbreak that's just causing civilization to collapse. And a lot of the script is about holding on to the last vestiges of civilization and society, and what happens when those last vestiges are pulled away, where those vestiges still exist and they're being utilized to try to civilize a zombie, but like, what really is the point? The zombie is still a zombie. Like, it's still dead flesh. There's really, you can't civilize every zombie. And it just there's a lot of stuff in the screenplay that just really emphasizes the bleakness of things. And a lot of times that can be a bit too much, but the way that it's presented in this script, it makes sense. Like, we've already gone through 2 films. It makes sense that we've gotten to this point where no, there is no light at the end of the tunnel. Everybody is screwed. The world is ending. And the sooner you just come to that realization, the better. And you better just accept it and go hang out on a desert island with the few people that you love or you care about, and hope that no zombies wind up there. Don't worry about power dynamics. Don't worry about power struggles, which is what happens with the military characters, is they are so obsessed with power and so on that ultimately leads to their deaths. Even when Bub becomes more attuned with being civilized because of what Frankenstein is doing with his experiments, by the end of the film, Bub is still a zombie. Like, he's never going to be human ever again. And it creates some interesting conversations about what really makes us human. Is it our memories? Is it our experiences with other humans? What makes us civilized? Like, what really does differentiate humans from animals or other people? Is it just other humans and the way that we interact with them, and the things that we learn from other humans in terms of what a moral compass is, or other aspects of humanity? And yeah, this script is a lot deeper than a lot of people give it credit for. And it's got great lines of dialogue too, and great quotes and great scenes that aren't just, you know, Joe Pilato's Rhodes character just being an asshole. But I mean, those scenes are great too. Uh, I'm running this monkey farm, Frankenstein, and I want to know what the fuck you're doing with my time. And of course, choke on him. Yeah, the way that Rhodes is written is just great. Really good stuff. Like the way that the military characters are written is great because you hate these guys. These guys are just a bunch of assholes, and you're just waiting for the zombies to eat them. And when they do at the end, like the way the script is set up, like it is well worth the wait. I mean, Rhodes gets ripped in half, and there's another guy who gets his head ripped off, and his vocal cords are stretching. And there's another guy who gets the top of his head ripped off and gets his fingers bitten off. Like they get what's coming to them, and then some. And of course, even before Rhodes gets taken out, like Bub shoots him a few times for killing Frankenstein. And even the stuff with Frankenstein and his dynamic with the other characters is well done. You actually do understand why the military guys shot him. You get their motivation. They're like, this guy is a sicko. He's using the dead bodies of our men to feed this zombie, and didn't ask us. He's doing it in secret. He dug up our men, and he's using them for this. Like, you could see why there was a retaliation. Maybe not necessarily a lethal retaliation, like shoot first, ask questions later, but you understand. And in the context of what's going on in the film, you could also understand why it would just be that quick, because everything's just falling apart. Everything is just collapsing. They're not finding a cure. They're not making any real progress. You understand the frustrations of Rhodes and his men too, with Dr. Frankenstein and with all these other researchers. It's like, okay, what have you done? Like, what do you have? And like, oh, we just made a zombie a little more civilized, and he's willing to like try to read a book, maybe try to communicate. He doesn't necessarily react to other people as if they are food. He's not reacting just by instinct. Like okay, all right. What are we gonna do? Have a school for zombies? Like, that's not helping us here. You know, you're teaching them fucking tricks. You're like, it's like, you get it. You understand why Rhodes is frustrated. And that just adds so much to the script, is that you really do understand the motivations of a lot of these characters. Even with the character John, there's a whole scene where he's asked by Sarah why he and his friend are not helping her and her team. Like, why are they not doing more to assist them when it comes to trying to figure all of this out? You know, it's like, why are you and Bill not helping me? And at least that's just great monologue, essentially, from John. And the writing here by Romero is just terrific. It's great. Like, I just love that bit of writing. I think that is some of Romero's best. Just that speech from John, just so strong, so captivating. It's depressing when you think about it, but it's so raw and real and just great. I think the way that Sarah's written as a serious, straightforward scientist who's not overly emotional when it comes to a crisis. She's strong. She's confident. She's capable. she can hold her own in a confrontation or a scene or a series of events involving, you know, a zombie or something where things are not going the way that she might initially plan. Uh, John, the helicopter pilot, he's a crack shot with a gun. He is somebody who doesn't take any shit from anybody. Um, Bill, he's an alcoholic. You know, he's not perfect, but he also has his own moments where, you know, he's willing to stand up for what he believes in and do what is necessary to survive. Um, the zombie Bub, you know, he's willing to do that as well. Even though he's technically dead, he's still willing to do what needs to be done so he can continue remembering, continue to have this sort of existence where he's able to remember and feel a semblance of what it was like to be alive and to be human. And of course, even the villains, you know, Rhodes and Steele and Rickles and all these other members of Rhodes's team. Like, there's a lot of stuff with their characters, and I would say with Rhodes, you get the most with him versus, you know, Rickles or Steele. But even though on the surface the characters seem a little one note, they still have their little nuances to them that make them ultimately still feel fleshed out, even though a lot of it is just a lot of bravado, and especially on Steele's case. And of course Frankenstein, you know, the scientist, who is just a mad surgeon. He has his own ulterior motives as well, that are revealed throughout the script. And of course you have the character Miguel, who I feel when it comes to all these characters, he's kind of the weakest. I think the reason is that they try to add some intrigue with this character because they show him as a guy who's very vulnerable, and he's really not handling the pressure of the world ending well and the zombies and all of this, and it's really taking its toll on his mental health, and he's not sleeping well, and he's exhausted mentally and physically. And I do appreciate that Romero shows a character like that, but I don't think Romero did the best job showing this guy before he was a wreck. There are mentions of a relationship between him and Sarah, but you never see it, and it's never really explained or discussed in depth or in any kind of detail. So you don't have that tragedy. You don't have the same emotional connection with that character. Where if those elements were there, I definitely do feel that that's a character that would be a lot stronger, because you would sympathize with him. You'd feel bad. You're like, man, things were so good. You know, he was in a relationship with Sarah, and they were close with one another, and then now they're drifting further and further apart because he's losing his grip on reality. And the scene where she has to sedate him forcefully, like, that would be a really strong scene, because you would actually have this palpable connection between the two characters. And then when he ultimately sacrifices himself, you could set up something where he does it because even in his state, he sees what's happening with Rhodes and his men, and sees what's going on with the power struggle, and he sees that could lead to Sarah's death, and he can't do anything because he's just not all there. So he just comes up with this last ditch idea of bringing the zombies down and having them take care of Rhodes and his men. And that would be more effective, because the way that it's set up, like, it just seems like he just lost it. He was just like, oh, I'm crazy now, and I'm just gonna let the zombies in. And you're just like, eh. And I mean, I get it. He had his arm cut off, and he was bit by a zombie, and he's dealing with PTSD and all this other stuff associated with that, and everything that he's seen, everything he's done. But like I said, there's no previous backstory that's really established with this guy. So for him to have all this screen time and to have all these big moments and not really have that much depth, I think that was definitely an error on Romero's part. I think you could have had a little bit more with Rhodes and his men too, to really make their characters just feel more than just personality traits. But the personality traits, the little quirks that they have, uh, it's enough. It's enough to get your bearings, so to speak, on these characters and who they are and what they stand for. But I think it would have been interesting to kind of delve a little bit deeper into those characters as well. But I'm fine with that not necessarily being there, because it still works enough with the personality and stuff. Miguel, like, other than him being shown in a vulnerable state that you don't see that much of in a film like this, it just wasn't executed that well. And it's kind of disappointing, because, like, if you just knew more about this guy going in, and there's just more to him, than when everything just culminates in him just letting these zombies in, it would just be a much more powerful moment. But yeah, that's really, honestly, the only major issue I have with the script. Everything else I think is handled really well. Even the slow burn nature of it, I think it works, because that's kind of what it's like to be trapped down in some kind of bunker. Like, days just crawl, and it just things just aren't necessarily moving in a very rapid fashion. Things just feel like time is just slowing down. And also, it's a good thing to do to build up the tension, to build up the suspense. And I mentioned earlier that paranoia could have been something, and I think that is something that Romero could have thrown in there. Like, somebody gets bit, and you have a character like one of the military guys, and he's actually hiding it. Like, he's hiding the fact that he got bit from everybody. And that leads to a scene where, of course, he becomes a zombie, and then you have the whole terror and drama of that, and so on. I think that would have been interesting. But I like so much of the script, though, that even though there's some things that could have been expanded upon or could have been added, I still think it's a really solid script, a really good screenplay. The cast is also great. Lori Cardille as Sarah. I thought she was fantastic. I thought she did a really good job playing a strong character. A character who happens to be a woman, but is written in a way where she's able to come across as a genuine, strong individual character, not someone who's propped up by politics or any of this other nonsense. Like, she is a strong female character because of her actions, and Lori really displayed that strength in a way that was very real. It didn't feel like she was faking it, and I felt that she had some really good chemistry with a lot of members of the cast, especially Terry Alexander. Joe Pilato as Rhodes, I mean, he is one of the best movie villains to me, because the character, not that deep, but he just adds so much personality and charisma to this character that you can't help but love every scene that he's in, even though the character is such a scumbag. But it's just because of what Pilato brings to it. I don't think any other actor could bring what Pilato brings to it. Like Pilato, you can clearly sense that he's having fun with it, but he's doing it in a way where it's not so tongue in cheek that you're not intimidated by this guy, that you don't take him seriously. You still take him seriously as a threat, even though you can tell that Pilato is just playing things up. Terry Alexander, I think his acting is good. I think it's some solid work, but I don't think the Jamaican accent was necessarily the best call. It's kind of distracting at times, and there are other times where it's kind of hard to understand his dialogue. But his performance and what he brings to it, the physicality of the character, it's strong. It's good. It's very effective. Jarlath Conroy, who played Bill, I liked his performance as well. Honestly, just felt like a regular guy who's just stuck in this just extraordinary situation, and the way that he reacted to a lot of things was very believable. Even had his own little catchphrase. Richard Liberty is as Dr. Frankenstein Logan. Just a lot of fun as this mad scientist. You could tell that Richard was just having a blast with this role, just playing this just wild mad scientist. And it wasn't just that he was just crazy. Like, you could tell that he's not all there, but you could see that he meant well, and you could see that he was actually trying to make a difference. He was trying to do something with Bub that was special. And the scenes with him and Bub work so well because of what Richard Liberty brings to the role, as well as Sherman Howard. And Sherman Howard as Bub, I think it's honestly an Oscar-worthy performance, because what he is able to accomplish with just his facial movements, with just a grunt or an attempt to say something like "Hello, Aunt Annie," or Alicia, like "Hello, Aunt Alicia," like him trying to come up with words. It's so effective and efficient and believable. Like, you bought that this was a zombie. This wasn't a guy in makeup just trying to act like a zombie. Like, you were like, okay, this is a real zombie, because of what Sherman Howard brought to the performance. When he's supposed to be angry and distraught when he finds Frankenstein's body, the emotions were just very strong, and yeah, it's just a great performance. I even like Gary Howard Klar. For some reason, I can't say his name. Gary Howard Klar. Klar. There we go. Klar. I don't know why I had such a hard time saying Klar. Sometimes my brain is weird like that. It seems like he's just essentially copying Lyle Lozado, the tough guy shtick. But he pulls it off. Yeah, he definitely does have a presence to him. Rickles, played by Ralph Romero, he's fine too. A lot of his bit is just this just laughing like a jackass, but he pulls that off well. Anthony Dileo Jr. as Miguel, a mixed performance to me. Like, there are some times where the acting showing desperation, showing him being just completely discombobulated and not mentally there, is some good work. But then there's other times where the line delivery is kind of flat, or he's kind of overacting a little bit too much, and just kind of a mixed performance, and honestly fitting for a mixed character when it comes to the way that the character is written. You also have Greg Nicotero, one of the makeup effects artists, who would go on to do K&B. He's in this as one of the soldiers. It's a good thing he doesn't have that many lines of dialogue, because he's not that great of an actor. But yeah, I still think it's a really good cast, and features some really nice looking cinematography by Michael Gornick, despite the gruesome nature and the grisly and bleak tone of the film, and even the limitations of the cave and everything. It still is a well shot film. You definitely see it in the scenes they shot in Florida in the opening, um, as well as some of the other moments in the movie. It's just a good, it's a well shot film from Romero, and Gornick and Romero just had this really good visual chemistry that was still very evident in this film. The editing by Pasquale Buba, I think, is also good. I think it's definitely the best when it comes to scenes with the zombies or scenes that have more movement and action, but I still feel that some of the slower scenes are still well edited. The music by John Harrison. Initially, I wasn't a big fan of it, but it's another aspect of the film that really grew on me. Now I really like the score. I love it. Even the Jamaican, Caribbean style kind of music. I know a lot of people criticize that, and initially I wasn't feeling it, but the more I listen to the score, the more I like it, and I think it creates an interesting contrast. And I think when it comes to the ending of the film and what John was talking about like, why do we have to worry about all this? We're never going to find a cure. We're never going to find a way to fix this. This is it. The creator decided to put a curse on us. It's over. Why don't we just enjoy the little bit of time that we have left on some island somewhere? So it makes sense that you have the Caribbean music, and when you get to the end of the movie, like that becomes more and more prevalent when it comes to score, and I think that's intentional. That's by design. So it's this mix of things. You have the foreboding, dark, sinister kind of music, but then you have like the Caribbean stuff, which is really what honestly the main characters, the ones that ultimately do survive, that's what they're trying to reach for. That's really what they're trying to get to, is that island. And so that's why there's these notes of the Caribbean style of music. The foreboding, sinister stuff I love too, because it really does evoke John Carpenter, Alan Howarth vibes. It's almost like John Harrison was greatly inspired by what they did and decided to do a tribute to what they did in terms of their style of music with the synthesizers and all that other stuff for his score for Day of the Dead. So yeah, I love this score. I think this score is just spectacular. I think it's really stellar. I think it's, if anything, it's really underrated. Um and the film, like, it's 100 minutes, and I think it's for the most part well paced. There are a couple moments where it's a bit slow, and it is one of those films, like, if you just be patient with it, I really do feel that it pays off. But yeah, I really like this film. It's a shame it didn't do better financially when it came out, but I think as the years have gone by, it's definitely become a film that more people have developed a taste for, and I think it's definitely for the better. But anyway, thanks for watching my review of Day of the Dead, and until next time, I'll see you later. See ya.